Okay, the next couple of videos will be about the 18th century, and there's going to be quite a few of them because a lot of things happened in the 18th century, particularly in the realm of culture and literature, and also because finally this is a period in which I know my way around a little bit. So let's get right to this. And the first thing, as you can see here from the title, that we want to take a look at is again sort of a large-scale background, and that is this notion of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment, or Aufklärung in German, is certainly a term that you will have come across, but also one of the more nebulous ones, one of the more difficult and elusive ones. And it is elusive for a number of reasons. First of all, it describes a way of thinking or other ways of thinking that do not really have a single foundational text or a single foundational moment. We can't say this is the moment that the Enlightenment starts, or if you want to know what the Enlightenment is, you have to read this text or that text. It's really a number of texts, a number of ideas that develop over a large span of time in different places and are being developed by different people. It is an extremely broad concept that shows itself in philosophy, in religion, in politics, in sciences, and in the arts. And also, it has, particularly more recently, been evaluated very diversely by posterity. What is it? Is this actually sort of an exclusively positive thing? Are there downsides to Enlightenment thinking, and so on? So for all of these reasons, it's not really very easy to grasp what is meant with the Enlightenment. But I'll try nevertheless to give you the broadest and the most simplified of overviews. So if we want to find a common denominator, one thing that we could, or the one thing that we can feel we can boil it down to, that could be something like confidence in reason or confidence in rationality. So that is really something that binds together most of the thinkers and most of the ideas and most of the movements that come out of the Enlightenment. And what that means is the underlying understanding that there is a logical and a rational order to the universe. And I'm going to go into these points afterwards. But that's sort of the basis for this. And then out of that comes this idea that when we use our reason and our rationality, things are going to get better. We are going to get better. Our attitudes, our knowledge, but also our manners are going to get better. So this idea of progress and improvement is something that is very characteristic of Enlightenment thinking. And finally, as we will see, particularly when we look at the Enlightenment in England and Scotland, a firm basis in empiricism. And we'll talk more about what that means. But as I said, I'm going to go through these points one after the other. So let's start with this idea of the universe as a perfectly ordered cosmos, which will imply a shift of balance between God and natural law, after all. Now, one of the poster boys of the Enlightenment is Sir Isaac Newton, the scientist, philosopher, mathematician, who in 1687 writes his Philosophiae Naturalis Principia Mathematica, and in it he lays the foundation, of course, for most of classical mechanics. Newton showed that the motions of objects on Earth and of celestial bodies are governed by the same set of natural laws. And at the center, of course, there's the law of gravity. But now this, of course, isn't a lecture series on the history of science or on mathematics. But what this exemplified was the recognition that you can find these laws and that the universe behaves in an orderly way if you're just able to understand these laws. And that had an impact, for example, on religious worldviews, because it moves away from an interfering and personal God. So you don't need a mover anymore. You don't need a transcendental figure that moves these celestial bodies, because you can now explain why they move in an orderly way. But of course, the perfection of the law for the age still seemed to point at a designer. There must be someone who has designed this beauty. This was one of the underlying condition, that the order mirrors God's wisdom. So we can see this struggle between how do we interpret this? What does that do to accounts like Genesis and so on? We can see this nicely in these lines by Alexander Pope, where he writes, "Nature and nature's laws lay hid in night. God said, 'Let Newton be,' and all was light." So it is Newton who uncovers this, uncovers these laws that lay hidden in nature. But for someone like Pope, we still need sort of a God to guarantee this. We will see maybe later how science will clash even more strongly with religious worldviews. So this, of course, has also an impact on art, on the representation of this order in the arts, in painting, but also in literature. Because since the order is understandable, it is also representable. If the underlying claim is that we can understand this order because it follows laws, then, and I can know these laws, I can uncover them, then I can also communicate them. And if you remember back just less than 100 years earlier, Milton had this idea that he was writing Paradise Lost to justify the ways of God to man. And that was a huge theological problem, because, of course, one of the characteristics of the ways of God is that they're inscrutable, that you're not supposed to understand them, whereas now suddenly you can understand them. So the imperative is, of course, to render this order in art as well. We can see this, for example, in again a few lines by Pope, where he describes a natural scene, the scene of Windsor Forest. And this is from the poem Windsor Forest, and he describes, "Here hills and vales, the woodland and the plain, here earth and water seem to strive again, but not chaos-like, together crushed and bruised, but as is the world, harmoniously confused. Where order and variety we see, and where, though all things differ, all agree." So the world is harmoniously confused. We seem to, at first glance, we might seem to see chaos, but it's just because we haven't understood the underlying law. We haven't understood the art that stands behind this. And this is how artists are supposed to represent the world. They're supposed to show us the ordering principles of the universe. This is another depiction of the time from of Windsor Forest, and you can see sort of this juxtaposition of the natural, this very organic looking forest, which is of course also cultivated as a park, the human, and also you see sort of culture in the form of the castle in the background. And here is another example, again from Alexander Pope, whom you see here on the image. And I will be quoting a lot from Pope here, because he is the foremost poet of the early 18th century and of Enlightenment thinking. So he really takes pride of place in many respects. So in the following quotation, which is from Pope's Essay on Man, so philosophical poem, long philosophical poem, we again see this idea that what we might look at as confusion or chaos is just some kind of order that we haven't understood yet. All are but parts of one stupendous whole, whose body nature is, and God the soul. All nature is but art unknown to thee, all chance direction which thou canst not see, all discord harmony not understood, all partial evil universal good, And in spite of pride, in erring reason's spite, one truth is clear: whatever is right. So that is a very sort of optimistic kind of philosophy. This idea, this is related to this idea, this Leibnizian idea that we are living in the best possible world, the best world that is possible. So whatever is must be right because it is, because the, the, the world has to be ordered, and then whatever you see must be good, and you just haven't understood the reason for why it is. But of course, the age's belief in rationality wasn't naive in the sense that they believed man to be instantly capable of everything. They were very well aware of the limitations of man in this respect, which you can find in this other passage on in the essay on man. Know then thyself, presume not God to scan. The proper study of mankind is man. So in one way, this is a reminder of humanism, when the study of humans that become interesting in themselves, but it also is a reminder not to question God in any way. And we'll see that towards the end of the 18th century, this will actually become a problem, because scientists will start to presume to scan God and not just study man. Placed on this isthmus of a middle state, a being darkly wise and rudely great is his man, with too much knowledge for the skeptic's side, with too much weakness for the stoic's pride, he hangs between, in doubt to act or rest, in doubt to deem himself a god or beast. And this should remind you of early modern stage, with the overachievers that deem themselves gods, and with the slaves of passion that fall down to the state of beasts. In doubt his mind or body to prefer, born but to die, and reasoning but to err. Here we can hear an echo of the memento mori of the Restoration and earlier periods. Alike in ignorance, his reason such whether he thinks too little or too much. Chaos of thought and passion, all confused, still by himself abused or disabused, created half to rise and half to fall. This we could read this as an allusion to Paradise Lost, if we want this, the rising of humans and the fall as well. Great Lord of all things, yet a prey to all. Sole judge of truth, in endless error hurled, the glory, jest, and riddle of the world. So one thing we could see from these quotes was that order was understood as a perfect relation of parts to a whole. And what that means is that there's an emphasis on structure, on the way that these parts are structured in order to form this whole. So structure as perfect organization, that's something that is important, which means that the writers of that time paid a lot of attention to the way that they structured their work, and how they related form and content. So form wasn't just something that you used and that you put some content in and it's all about the content, but rather the structure should be a reflection of the content. We see this in this line, this famous line from Pope's essay on criticism: the sound must seem an echo to the sense. So basically the form should mirror, should echo the content in this way. So this is where aesthetics come in. This is where this interest in the formal properties of literature or the arts in general come in. But we'll talk much more about this later on. But to stay with literature, the most fitting poetic form that the age found for this was the heroic couplet. Now, I don't go into the details of literary analysis, things that are usually covered by the introduction to literary studies, but here I want to get a little bit more specific, because this is such a great example of how these very, very broad history of ideas aspects can actually find their manifestation even in these sort of very technical aspects of literary construction. So let's take a look at the heroic couplet. Now, it is a sequence of rhyming pairs of iambic pentameter lines. So we need to get a little bit technical here. As you hopefully know, an iamb is one metrical foot that consists of one unstressed and one stressed syllable. So that would be something like da-dum, unstressed, stressed, and pentameter means 5 meters. So if there's 5 of these iambs, you have an iambic pentameter, and that looks in the sort of the symbolic representation a little bit like this. So da-dum, 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 da-dum. That's how an iambic pentameter sounds like. And the iambic pentameter is by far the most common line form, the most common metrical form in English literature. So you should spot this right away. You should hear this right away. And if you're looking for a meter, the most common form would be the iambic pentameter. And if you, for example, if you have a lot of these and do not rhyme them at all, then you have blank verse. So Paradise Lost is written exclusively in these iambic pentameter. Most of Shakespearean drama is written in this. But the heroic couplet makes some sort of adjustments to this, partly through this couplet rhyme. So every 2 lines rhyme, A, B, B, C, C, and so on, but also through the internal structuring of this. So couplet means basically just that 2 lines rhyme. So here, this isn't heroic couplets. This is again the opening of Paradise Lost, where we have iambic pentameters, but we have them in blank verse. And if you remember, one trick that Milton used to keep us going and to keep the poem from becoming too repetitive is that he has all of these run-on lines. And I'm going to make these visible now. So what you see here color-coded is basically syntactical units. It's not full sentences, but parts of sentences that actually belong together. And what that should show you is how very rarely do these syntactical units end with the line, but very often they go across the line. The fruit of that forbidden tree, whose mortal taste brought death into the world, till one greater man restore us. So very, very rarely, like in Regain the Blissful Seed, comma, does the syntactical unit also end with the end of the line. And that's the major difference to heroic couplets, because there is a strong coincidence of line and syntactical unit. So basically, with the end of the couplet, the sentence ends. But there is even a further strong division between the lines and even in the middle of the lines, so that all of the structure becomes extremely symmetric. So I'm going to show you just one example here from 4 lines from John Denham to show you how that works. So this is addressed to a river, to the Thames. Oh, could I flow like thee and make thy stream my great example, as it is my theme. Though deep yet clear, though gentle yet not dull, strong without rage, without o'erflowing full. And again, we can sort of color code it for syntactical, but also for units of meaning. And we can see how very strongly it is symmetrical, but also how very much it works by giving us oppositions that are then synthesized. So it starts with this full line, oh, could I flow like thee and make thy stream my great example, on the one hand, as it is my theme. And then we see that my great example, as it is my theme, that we have within the lines, we have sort of this short break where you kind of take a stop and then go on. And then even further, so though deep yet clear, though gentle yet not dull, is again in the middle of the line we have this break, but even within these halves we have further halves, though deep yet clear, though gentle yet not dull, strong but without rage, full but without overflowing. So we see how he works with these contrasts and tries to interfuse them harmoniously, as we saw from Pope earlier on. So this was seen, and you find this poetic form all throughout the poetry of the age, and this attempt at reining in the chaos of meaning and the chaos of structure and the chaos of potential forms, and to find rather some natural laws of aesthetics that could guide poetic creation like it does nature. And of course, they shouldn't have done that. They shouldn't have started to look for the one law that tells us what is a good piece of art, because of course after a few decades of searching they find out that this doesn't exist, and then everything falls to pieces and we get romanticism, but that's a different story that we'll come to later. So the next aspect that I enumerated at the beginning was that of progress and improvement. Now, underlying this is the belief in the existence of real values and real standards. And human culture is a progressive uncovering of these values and standards. This is the aesthetics, the laws of artistic creation. This is another attempt to find these, to uncover these standards and these values. And as we do that progressively, culture becomes better and more refined. So this is this idea of culture as refinement, as a gradual bettering. We saw this, if you remember, I talked about the Restoration stage and how this was all celebration of immorality and so on. And then there was this this backlash against this at the end of the 17th century that moved us to a different type of drama that saw the stage as a reforming instrument, and that has this idea of the stage as refining the age. And this is exactly this. We should become more refined and better gradually. And behind that, there is this idea of what people like Jean-Jacques Rousseau called human perfectibility. This doesn't mean that humans are perfect. We saw this in Pope, how short we fall of this, but this belief that we get better and better and better until we at one point actually reach perfectibility, until we can become perfect. And that, of course, has a huge impact on literature and the function that literature is being given, because that basically means if we can refine, if we can become better, then the arts need to be a part of that process, which means that art's moral purpose is to be didactic, is to teach. So all throughout the 18th century, we have this very, very strong impulse of this imperative of the arts and literature alongside, to be didactic, to be educational, to make us better people. And finally, in this large-scale survey of the backgrounds of the Enlightenment, particularly, as I said, in the English-speaking context, we should mention empiricism as a philosophy, as a theory that is strongly influential and that will have its impact on literature, of course, as well. Now, empiricism is a theory of knowledge that asserts that knowledge comes only or primarily from sensory experience, so from observation, from what we can see, what we can learn through our senses, hearing, smelling, touching, and so on. So empiricism emphasizes that experience and evidence is central to knowledge, especially sensory perception, in the formation of ideas. We cannot form ideas without the input that comes through our senses. And they put that over this notion of innate ideas or tradition, that we, the opposite idea would be that we're maybe born with some ideas, and from these we can generate knowledge. This is the difference between knowledge that is a priori, so before, or a posteriori, so knowledge that comes only after we have sort of gained some sort of input. Names in the English context that are associated with empiricism: Francis Bacon, right there at the beginning of the early modern age, kickstarting the scientific revolution together with others, but also thinkers like Thomas Hobbes or John Locke, who had this idea, you might have heard of that, of the mind as the tabula rasa, an empty blank sheet of paper. It's basically like a computer on which there is no data yet, and the computer can't do anything without being fed anything. So this was the idea. The mind, when you're born, your mind is completely empty, and everything that you can think is something that had to have come prior through your senses. Now, this has, of course, an important influence on literature and on culture, because the belief that what is given can be known and can be communicated creates a very imitative or mimetic conception of art and representation. This idea that art is an imitation of life, or as the age would have put it, art is a mirror to life. So art should mirror life, should be based on evidence, it should be based on things as they really are, and it should give that without any change. It should not change things. The mirror, of course, is that which gives us an unbiased view of reality, and this is the ideal for literature that comes out of that. So there is an interest. Empiricism brings with it an interest in the experience, also the experience of the individual, because that's, after all, how all knowledge is being created, by individuals experiencing something. The importance of evidence in the form of given facts. You should base whatever you're saying on that which is actually given as a fact, real objects. And if we couple this with an emphasis on causation, on rationality, we basically already have the recipe that will generate what we would call realist narrative, the realist novel in the beginning of the 18th century. But we'll get to that.